Hi, everybody. My name is Natalie Yeadon. I'm the CEO and co-founder with Impetus Digital. At Impetus Digital, we have built some of the best-in-class asynchronous and synchronous virtual collaboration and communication tools. We work with life science companies from across the globe, and we have done so for the past 13 years. We've helped people and companies with everything from virtual advisory boards, online medical education and investigator meetings, publication groups, and all sorts of other exciting online programs. And since the launch of our Insight events platform, we've also been able to successfully work with pharma companies on MSL and large Salesforce training events, innovation hackathons, corporate events, and all kinds of other things in between. But more importantly, at Impetus, we really believe that everything starts with a conversation. And from these big, hairy, audacious conversations with some of the leading edge thinkers, digital provocateurs, and healthcare leaders, we can all work to collectively and positively disrupt healthcare. So I'm super excited to having one of these healthcare leaders with me today. This is actually Bree Bush. She's actually the Vice President and Chief Data Officer at GE Healthcare. She's been leading healthcare organizations through transformation with GE Clinical Command Centers for more than 12 years. She was actually focusing on utilizing simulation modeling as well as advanced analytical tools in order to help do things like optimize inpatient, procedural, as well as clinical capacities. So in her role, Bree has helped organizations improve access for patients, streamline operations, as well as improve financial performance, while also creating a culture of staff empowerment and continuous improvement. Recently, Bree led the first of its kind command center activation at a very large academic medical center, which brought sophisticated decision support tools, process reengineering, and a centralized department together to enable what they're calling a real-time healthcare. So today she oversees command center design and activation, but she's doing a lot of work actually with pharma in the precision healthcare space. So we're really going to want to dig into that as well. And she's been doing all kinds of work with like over 64 hospitals in the US prior to doing her current role. Bree joined GE Healthcare 14 years ago through the Edison Engineering Development Program. This is a highly selective program that was designed to grow future engineering leaders. While in the program, Bree designed next generation diagnostic imaging equipment and brought a high-end ultrasound system to the market. Welcome, Bree. So happy to have you on the show.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
So what a brilliant career. And certainly when we think about GE, we realize, what an interesting company that is. There's all kinds of legs to this. And, we also are always, I'm always inspired by women who go into, engineering, mathematics, sort of like the whole STEM area. So I was actually just curious if you can share with us, what started your career trajectory and how you ever landed and decided to stay and grow your career at GE.
Yeah, so I think my dad started it probably by freaking me out about making sure you had a job when you graduated college. And he said, women engineers, there's not enough of them, focus there. And I had loved math and science. So I studied mechanical engineering at Bucknell University. And then as an intern joined GE and started to understand the culture of GE and what they were doing on innovation and really impacting patients. And so I've really only worked, which is very shocking, at GE my whole career. So from intern to now, and just have really enjoyed the experience. I did some, as you mentioned, in engineering, and then realized pretty quickly that I wanted to see the impact more directly in the hospitals and with the patients. And so I moved into our consulting business, spent about 5 to 8 years there, maybe, on transforming these hospitals. Helping with the cultural transformation, the process, the grind. And I just really enjoyed getting to know the nuances and working with so many really intelligent people in the hospitals to improve their operations. And then that led to me to command centers. Process is great, but at some point, the technology is just not cutting it. We just don't have enough insights in the moment that are needed. And that's when we really launched the command center business and bringing this new real-time healthcare to providers. And so I did that for, 5, 8 years. I can't even remember, count all these years, putting them together. And then just recently, now lead our digital pharma solutions team, which is mostly focused on overseeing how we can partner with pharmaceutical companies on their vision of precision health. And GE's very, very focused on precision health by bringing our two capabilities together. Again, in the end, for the caregivers, giving them better insights, more clinical decision support at their fingertips. And so that's a new partnership that we've started within GE Healthcare.
I love it. And I kind of want to dabble into all those. And you've got such a great overview. I mean, there's something to really be said about going deep within an organization and covering so much scope and then bringing those insights into the various roles. So I'm just going to spend a couple of minutes because a lot of times, people, when they think of GE, yes, GE Healthcare has been around for a while, but it's not sort of always top of mind as a company that people are partnering with or working with. But as we start to think about big tech and those kinds of players coming in, it makes sense that there would be a runway and an opportunity for these kinds of, electronic companies and working with GE Healthcare. So it does actually make sense. But maybe we can actually just start with some of the problems that you were solving when you were working on the command center parts. And so getting into specifics about specifically the digital apps and what they were doing for healthcare facilities and institutions.
Yeah, I think if you think back, maybe 10 years ago, everyone was going live on their EMRs, right? So all the data is finally becoming digitized. And I think there was a point, though, that said, okay, this is all very siloed. This is, one piece of information that if I'm, the physician, I see this. If I'm a case manager, I see something else. And there was a need to get to even better operations, but something that really went across all the care teams. And so I think at the center of it, many people started with, we don't have enough beds to care for the patients, our costs are too high, similar, cost, quality, and access that we hear all the time. But they had now digitized information. So what the real problem statement was is how do we improve care coordination and better outcomes, for the patients? And the command center came in as really an opportunity to begin to aggregate the data across all these different systems that people are working in. So you have the radiology team working in PACS and the clinical team in there, as case management had their own teams, and bringing them together so that we could move from kind of historical dashboards, looking back at, hey, what happened yesterday? Did we perform well? To real-time in the moment optimization to improve flow, save time for the care teams, and unify all that information in the end for better throughput and access for the patients. So that's where it really started. And we built kind of use case by use case. It started with, again, access challenges of we have such a overwhelming demand. And I think, through COVID, we saw that get 10 times worse, right? So I think that was the initial point. And now you see, well, how do we harm patients less by using this real-time information that says this patient's at risk in the moment? And that's really where we've progressed to the command center solution over the last 5 years.
So it's very interesting to me because, one of the things that at first blush, your thoughts are when you think of GE or even GE Healthcare, very strong stance as it relates to hardware. We're often used to a lot of the work in the medical devices that you have in imaging and diagnostics. And that's kind of the first flavor, if you will, when you think of GE Healthcare. Now, it sounds to me like you're moving in this direction of almost like consulting services. And we're in this new world of virtual, which is digital apps. How are people accepting that? And how do you, merge or manage this under this realm that you're sort of known more for your hardware as opposed to your software?
Yeah, I think we've done a lot to try to make ourselves be known in the market as a digital leader. And I think it's leveraging our strength, right? When we've been digital for a long time on what we need to do on our PAC systems and our imaging. And so I think it was just kind of extending that story. But I think you're right. I think we see a massive investment, and we are investing heavily in digital apps that support very specific use cases. And we've also invested very heavily in a platform around that data aggregation. I think we all know there are, whether that's looking for real world data or in the hospital setting, the aggregation of information is still very limited, which hinders your ability to do more advanced things like AI development and, smart scheduling and all these different types of things that you can do. You can't really do until you get that data aggregation. So there's no silver bullet in terms of how we started. We started by finding one customer that we could have an impact on. Then we did 3 more. Then we did 5 more. And that's really how we built it. I don't think there was a, there was a focus to say, can we make this work? We're a little startup within GE Healthcare, which is a unique place to be backed by a massive company, but still have that startup, go get it attitude. And so that's really where we started. I think more and more now you see kind of the data aggregation happening around imaging data and genomics data and all this other pieces coming in. And so I think we'll continue to expand. And I think we have an awesome platform to do that upon.
So you said it so eloquently, Bree. Data is the new gold. It's the oil. It's everything. And the when we start to talk about artificial intelligence and we start talking about machine learning and all of these kinds of training platforms for really smart technology, we need that data. So my question to you is that as you were kind of aggregating all of this medical device data, what sort of brought you to this place of, hey, we need to maybe start talking to pharma companies, or what bridged working with hospitals, institutions, and healthcare providers into the realm of working with pharma?
Yeah. So what we saw in the market was that pharma is starting a lot of these, these pill plus programs or these beyond the pill, right? So focused on how can they really impact, again, the quality of care that's being given, the access of care. Obviously their focus is on the drugs that are on market, but, no different. And so it seems like it's still early days in terms of our conversations, but we saw them heavily investing in developing AI solutions for clinical decision support, better diagnosing these rare diseases that are really hard. And if you think about it, they're really the only ones incentivized to do this, because if I'm a provider, a hospital, I might see one of these patients a year. I'm not going to spend a lot of money on an AI development for one patient a year. Even GE Healthcare, we focus on more broad use cases as well that are going to differentiate our products. And so they had this kind of niche, or have this niche case of, for rare disease or difficult diagnosis disease, creating these AI solutions. Where they see the bridge and where I think there's a great partnership is they have massive research companies who've been studying the disease forever, for the drug development and now developing the AI, but didn't have a deployment platform. And that's really kind of a unique area that I think GE has the capability to truly impact, is bringing these to market in the workflow, which I think is very critical. I think there's enough IT solutions going at, providers every day. And so we had invested heavily in our Edison platform, which the whole job of that is to take and aggregate information, orchestrate AI, and push it directly back into the workflow. So directly into, the source systems or the PACS or whatever they might be using. And so we found this really nice synergy where as they were investing more, GE is a great platform. I think our size and scale, the number of products we have in our market really help us to get these out there as quickly as possible and as effectively as possible. And so that's one area that we've decided to start with. Again, we're building this business. We've been building it over the last year and a half. But that seems to be a really good alignment. And I think over time, we'll do more AI development together. We are, as I mentioned, both are very focused on precision health. How do we find more patients that are like those ones that they saw in the trials, exactly like that? How do we automate that? So I think there'll be more in the future, but that's kind of our initial focus.
The whole world is revolving around data, as I was mentioning earlier, and you were also suggesting, and all companies seem to be moving into that space of wanting to be able to partner with pharma on the analytic space, on the AI, on the data mining. We're starting to talk about companies like IBM with Watson. You're talking about GE Healthcare with Edison. There's Oracle, there's IQVIA, there's all kinds of other analytics companies. What is GE Healthcare and your specific division doing to differentiate yourself versus all these other players in the analytics space?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of our biggest strength is our installed base. I think if you look at our other big competitors in Siemens and Philips, from getting out there, we have a breadth of, of products that are out there, whether that's in the cardiology space, the imaging space, the ICU space. And so I think that's really one of our big differentiators is our breadth and the ability to partner in that area. And then workflow integration. I just think a report or an email that's going to go to someone or another pop-up in an EMR is not the way to actually get this AI adopted. And so I think that's the other thing is we really have a unique capability because of our products to integrate these AI into our products, which almost helps with the adoption immediately because it's part of their normal workflow. It's integrating their other devices. And we have a massive team who's at the elbow with the providers all the time, helping them understand the meaning behind these algorithms, helping improve their workflow. And so they're really partners with the providers out there as well. We know there's competitors, of course there are, but I think that's where we find ourselves unique. And we've honestly found a really good cultural alignment, frankly, between how we like to partner and how pharma likes to partner, and have seen just a really good partnership together around that today.
So it sounds like the partnership is really revolves around clinical discovery and really sort of thinking beyond probably everything from new chemical entities, like you said, rare diseases, oncology, really difficult immunotherapeutics. And then there's probably also an option around digital therapeutics. So if I'm a pharma company coming in and saying, I need to continue to build my pipeline, I'm pharma company X, how do I approach GE Healthcare? And what is that? What kind of conversation are we having to get started?
Yeah, I'd say most of our focus is for probably drugs coming on market very soon or drugs that are already on market. For the most part, that's kind of our initial focus. Not that that won't expand over time, but in most cases, we're starting with the commercial teams and the pharmaceutical companies. And what we've heard is that this is a big transformation to trust that kind of these types of digital tools can help support their overall goals. It's a big transformation for them as well versus the normal processes in terms of how they go to market. We've mostly been talking to the strategic business leaders or kind of business development teams because they really horizontally understand the capabilities across kind of all the disease areas that pharma is working on, and finding one specific use case where we can have a big impact. And that's really what we've done is that, hey, this is early for you. Our platform is out there pretty extensively right now. We're continuing to grow that, but let's start with one use case, see if we can prove that there's value in taking these digital tools to help support your business and getting the right patients identified and expand from there. And so from there, kind of business development brings in, the right teams and determines which ones are most ready to have a discussion with us. But what we've heard is where there's one decision support algorithm, there's 10 to 20 being developed right behind it. And I think that's going to move upstream, right? Right now, it's like drugs on market, and we're doing this development. I have a feeling that similar to companion diagnostics that are being done during drug discovery, that things will begin to move a little bit more upstream as new drugs come to market.
So the drug is, I'm assuming that you're saying it's at the point of commercialization. So they've already gone through their phase 3 clinical studies. They've been regulatory, approved through FDA or, whatever regulatory body. They're about to launch. So the question comes down to is what kinds of analytics? So what kind of AI are you putting into workflow systems to be able to inform pharma of important decisions they need to make? So explain a little bit about what that workflow looks like.
So I think what's happening really is that pharma is partnering with other organizations and licensing algorithms that help with early detection of whatever disease they're focused on. And so they're not, I think their goal is earlier detection means earlier, intervention, and we can improve the outcomes. Not necessarily will this patient end up getting on my therapy or not. What we're finding is in general, they're trying to improve the outcomes for these rare diseases or these specific areas. So in many cases, they've already partnered or found an algorithm that's out there that they're licensing. And really what we're doing is bringing it to market. So an example might be, there might be a patient who has a cardiac disease. What they want is to deploy an algorithm that when the ECG gets done with the patient, the AI runs behind it. And then in the report, it says this patient has a probability of having this disease, and it triggers in the physician's mind, okay, yeah, if that's the case, the next 5 things I need to do are, right? And just because of the complexity of these diseases, there's not it's not definitive at that moment that patient has a disease. It's all right, now I have to do the, go get an echo or whatever else to confirm the diagnosis and then decide on the treatment plan. So they're really looking at, if you think about, some of these diseases, 90% of the patients are undiagnosed. So how do I get to a point where we can get 50% of the patients actually diagnosed correctly to really impact kind of that patient's overall outcomes? So that's how we're working with them.
So concretely, is there a specific disease area or therapeutic that you're really trying to dig into?
From a GE perspective, no, we are, agnostic to that. We're letting kind of the pharmaceutical companies focus us. It doesn't really matter to us, frankly. GE is doing AI development and also looking for AI partnerships in similar ways. Those are more on broad markets. We have a lot of focus on oncology and cardiology, so does pharma. And that's kind of where we have some strength. But we've seen, again, a couple in the cardiology space, some in the lung disease space, cancer pretty heavily as well.
Is GE Healthcare also agnostic with the algorithms that the pharma companies are already licensing? Or is GE also making suggestions of algorithms that they should be considering?
Yeah, we are happy to connect and do that if we can. We find that pharma is pretty good at sourcing the market and finding their own algorithms. I think where we recently announced a partnership with Sophia Genetics around connecting all of the radiomic data that we have in imaging and the genetic data with EMR data. I think that will open up more doors for us to begin to do multimodal kind of AI development going forward. But for now, we've mostly been, either connecting them or they're coming to us when they're about 2 years away from saying this is ready to go to market. Can GE be a deployment platform for us?
So really interesting use case for you, especially when you're talking about rare diseases and really underdiagnosed, really tough diseases, or some of these people will go 10, 20 years before anybody finds out what's wrong with them. So these specialty algorithms of, I guess it's sort of like specific attributes, blood, all kinds of different diagnostics and tests all piled in, aggregated, and then marking that, this person has, like you said, a certain propensity for the disease. Is this being built into the GE diagnostic systems that then feed in? So how does the whole GE ecosystem play into that final output where the doctor looks at a screen and says, patient X has, 50% chance of, having, Lou Gehrig's disease?
Yeah. So I'd say over the past 4 or 5 years, we've been spending a lot of time on getting our GE devices. So you think our classic MRs, CTs, ECG equipment on our Edison platform. And so many of them are either fairly mature on that journey or that's, on everyone's roadmap, because we see more and more AI algorithms that we want to deploy on devices. But today it's super cumbersome to do that. Every time you do that, you're going through FDA approval for every different type of product that you have. So what we're doing is using kind of our algorithm orchestrator that's built on Edison. It has a bunch of different services on there to be able to do this fast and at scale. So that's kind of the journey that we've gone through, I guess, to connect the devices. That then allows us to, it's an orchestrator, right? So it allows us to bring the data in, but then also determine what's the best place to write back. That could be, you need to prioritize a work list. It could just be it's a notification on a report, but that orchestration platform really that we've invested heavily in is our ability to write that back. And we want it to be agnostic, frankly. I think it would not be the best outcome for a patient if an algorithm can run on all GE CTs, but none of any of our other competitors. That's not right for the patients. And I don't think from a provider standpoint, they want something that's just sometimes used and sometimes not. So the platform is being developed to be agnostic. And take in different data sources and be able to push to different data sources as well. Now, nuances around what exactly you can push to when you're agnostic, you have to work through that use case by use case, but that's the capability that we're developing.
So Bree, what is the business model for this analytics platform? Is pharma paying for a subscription? Are there certain outputs that they pay for? How does this actually work?
Really what they're paying for is the deployments at the sites. So they're paying a per site fee, monthly fee. It's a managed service contract. There's some work up front around the design and helping them think through how do they best get the workflow integrated. you've seen one provider, you've probably seen one provider's workflow. You have to understand the nuances there. But yeah, mostly a managed service contract where we, GE, will really do wing to wing for them. Everything from getting people to sign up for using the algorithms to the training around it, and then managing the maintenance and support. And I think that's another nice component of this for pharma, right? Someone called it a turnkey solution. GE will do it wing to wing. And that's really the business model here today.
And so what would be some of the pushback at the institutional level? Again, because you're talking about all sorts of backflow, workflow issues, idiosyncrasies, competitive issues with other people also wanting to do things. How are you overcoming? What are some of these barriers, and how is GE overcoming these?
Yeah, I think like anything, it's time and money is probably the biggest pushback, especially now that there's so many initiatives for the IT departments to implement, and so many different priorities. How do you sneak this one in? Again, it's a rare disease. It may happen, once a year for them. And so what we're really trying to do is make it as seamless as possible. GE has EMR integrations at thousands of sites. How do we re-leverage those? How do we make sure that once we ask for an interface once, we never ask for it again? We have all that data integrated within GE. So that's, I think, one of the key areas is the IT lift. That's, make it as light as possible. The second area is clinical acceptance. And I think, you've got every disease, you have to go to a different stakeholder. But I will say pharma's done a great job on, during their development of the algorithms, getting a lot of clinical feedback on, is this worth it? What exactly do you need to see to make it impactful? Again, it's a rare disease. You probably don't know, but you might have to Google, what's going on with this patient and what the next step is. And so that's the other piece, is getting the clinical adoption. We find once we have a clinician who's like, yes, there's value in it, the rest of the organization will support. It's just a timing question of, when do you get the resources to do it? And so I think that IT integration, making it as seamless as possible is a key there.
So we can see definitely how your apps, I'm assuming that as well too, the command center tiles and the apps, and there's all sort of like this ecosystem integration, and really all of this bubbling up to the top of a really easy, seamless, notice, or somebody to be notified that this person is a potential candidate. What about the actual patient? So we hear a lot about patient centricity and patients being involved. Is there an opportunity to integrate GE tiles, apps, whatever software in a patient portal where there's also opportunities to notify them directly?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's probably early days on us doing that. One of the key areas, I think, if you see about remote patient monitoring, right, a lot of that at-home monitoring information that being pulled in, we see probably more of that, notifications back. In a lot of cases, we want to leave it up to the provider in terms of how they do that. We're not today, I would say consumerism is not the strength of GE. We know our customer very, for the most part of the majority of our business is the providers. So that's what we're focused, but we know that's coming, and are investing in kind of key areas that we can give that information back to the patients.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I'm curious as well too, is what has happened with your business? What was going on pre-COVID, and that as the world has pivoted since COVID, has anything changed in adoption, thinking, business models, or what you're actually delivering to people?
Yeah, I transitioned to my new role mid-COVID, so I can maybe speak a little bit better on what's the command center, because I knew that before and after. But I think we're seeing acceleration to cloud. I think 100% we've seen that. Back in the day, we would have said, yeah, people are a little bit more hesitant to put anything in the cloud. Now we feel like more and more organizations are very interested in getting things deployed in the cloud and open to it, more open than ever before. I think the focus has gotten really intense. The pressure that's put on the healthcare systems has forced them to think about new and creative way to do business. To some extent, they've had to recreate themselves right through COVID. And so that's been very, very evident. And then, there's a lot of stop and goes through COVID and changes in the focus, but I think that second level app now, what we call our tiles, this kind of real-time decision support, seems more and more important because the resources are getting very scarce. And so they don't have time to call around and figure out what's going on with the patients. they have to have digital tools to support them. And we've just seen a massive uptick in people wanting to use new tools for care coordination, frankly. And it focused right now still pretty heavily in the inpatient capacity, but we're seeing that branch out. I think as everyone saw, telemedicine really breaking through more and more. But I think they're going to be constrained for a while. COVID hit providers' financials, pretty heavily as well. And so, these sort of second order apps that they can use to help improve the quality of care that's given, drive down the cost. I think we're seeing more and more focus on that than ever before.
And as a result of that, Bree, have you seen your target audience change over time, i.e. specifically pre versus post-COVID? What I mean specifically are the key drivers now to people wanting to utilize your software, your notifications, and again, with pharma and what they're looking for, has that become a lot more? Is there also another driver internally in the institutions of working with administrators, people who are trying to manage protocol, standardization and systems? What is that looking like, and the kinds of target audiences that you're now working with?
Yeah, I think on the command center front, it's been probably the same, just more intense focus. I think, we always had, these were top level initiatives being driven down by the COO, CNO, CMO, something like that, to drive them across the organization. I think COVID showed the importance of having, network wide information. I think it was really hard in the beginning for them to figure out where the patients are, who is most sick, are my resources aligned? And so I think the problem got a bright light shined on it in terms of the need for these applications. So we're seeing the same, I would say, stakeholders and level of engagements at providers, just an increase now that they really know the tools that they currently have, kind of the first order systems, what they can do and what they can't do. And the need is very clear for the second. So that hasn't changed a ton, just the intensity has changed. On the pharma side, honestly, I didn't really see him before COVID, so I can't really talk to that. I think we still heard the same things, from what I heard from my predecessor was data. Do we have more access to it? I think what you mentioned, though, about kind of that enterprise management of these algorithms, that will be an impact to us in terms of our speed to execution on some of these AI and clinical decision support apps, for sure, because there's more governance at the provider level on managing them and investing in the smart areas, right, that are going to have an impact for them.
Curious as well, too, if there's any discussions, opportunities for partnerships with payers, third party, governmental. Do they have an interest in managing people upstream so there's not so much back end costs associated with hospitalizations or rehospitalizations? What's kind of going on there in the plans?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I think they're all getting into how do we reduce the cost of our patients. And so that is another target audience as we look at, different ways to deploy. You can deploy in the hospital setting, but you can also work on deploying in the, with the insurance companies and the providers as well. So we're seeing a little bit of that. I would say it's still not by any means kind of our target audience right now, but we've seen a little bit more focus there.
You're saying, Bree, that your initial sort of foray has really been targeting a lot of the commercial folks over at the pharma medical device companies. I'm curious as well, too, is this going to move a little bit earlier on in the discussions with companies in the discovery and identification of target product profiles, new opportunities, even for example, clinical trials and being able to identify appropriate people who could be eligible? Are those discussions that you're having actively?
Yes, for sure. I mean, I think it's a crowded market though, right? So if you think about the CROs in that space, as well as, pharma developing stuff internally, but I think just as we can do the automation downstream when a drug is on market, we believe that we can really help with the automation in patient trials, specifically, EMR data. I feel like a lot of companies out there can do. I think when you start to say, well, I want, reading of the radiology scans, right? That becomes more complex in terms of how you actually get that data and analyze it. And then you think about the multimodal and how complex it gets between, okay, well, I want someone who has this type of imaging scan that says this, not just in the report, but I want you to scan the image. I also want to see this genomic data put in and then flag. So I think that will be an area we get into and do more of that. And I think, again, it'll be probably specifically around driving, automated tools integrated in the workflow to help with better trial matching. And we don't think we can do it all. So finding our niche of, is that the combination of, specific types of data types that we really find that's our niche focus. There's a lot of people who've been playing in that space for a lot longer than we have, but we think there is a very key element that we can do to help with trial matching, site identification as well. And then, downstream, are there things that we can do to develop companion diagnostics? You think about the digital companion diagnostics to support as drugs come on market. So I definitely see that as our roadmap. We're trying to walk before we can run and just find a few areas where we can have a really large impact in the short term.
Yeah. So, and on this note about digital twins, what is GE Healthcare saying about the digital twin, and what is this going to mean for the future?
Yeah, the digital twin, I guess that we reference, and I know it's a fancy word that people throw out in many different areas, is really a digital twin of a hospital's operations. And so what we've been doing is, for a long time, probably much longer than we've been doing command centers, we have kind of unique simulation modeling capability, which allows them to recreate their hospital operations. So thinking about, how do I change a surgical schedule to better optimize my ED wait times? Like, those get complicated to think about, and you need something to test. So we've partnered with hundreds of different organizations as they've been going through their strategic plans, as they go through master facility plans, or they're trying to identify, in my fixed capacity, how do I squeeze more out of this? And how do I care for more patients? That digital twin allows them a safe environment to test different solutions and measure the impact of it. So they're prioritizing where they're going to focus on the highest impact area. A lot of them have done Lean and Six Sigma for a long time. And, there's in the nature of it's always continuous improvement. But some of what needs to happen is the bigger changes, that having a tool that you can simulate and see the impact on it helps with change management and adoption, and knowing that you're investing in the right areas, the bigger changes that have to be made.
You mentioned a little earlier, Bree, about the plans to be, machine or device agnostic, and just being able to provide the service to the institutions and be able to provide the data. So I'm just curious about the concept around interoperability. So, for example, a really important piece of information that's going to be fed into all diagnostics is going to be genome and genetic tests. And so I'm just kind of curious, and again, as we start to see other tech companies playing in the space, the Googles, the Amazons, the Apples, how are you planning to consider interoperability in all of this?
Yeah, I think it's a big focus, and one of the top priorities, from all of our voice to customer that we've done, that providers have asked for, is interoperability. I think our focus will be on interoperability to improve workflow. Specifically, I think that's going to be our major focus, because we have the ability, again, to take event data and really the device data, aggregate that with EMR and contextual data, as well as genomics. That's really where we're going to be focused. We know that providers want a platform that allows them to do that, because in many times the monitors and events aren't talking to each other. We need that capability. So we're doing that, I think, at kind of an Edison level, and we're also doing that as we look at our products. How are they pulling data from each other? How are they leveraging data to improve interoperability? I think I've heard, one of the top priorities of what they would like GE to invest in. And it doesn't really feel like anyone solved that quite yet.
Absolutely. And of course, there's always the other pharma hurdles, like the unprecedented level of regulatory and compliance needs that everybody has to jump over, those hoops that are not necessarily in other less regulated industries. So I'm also just kind of curious about your thoughts. GE has a stronghold in the areas where you have heavy amounts of your devices already plugged in. So your diagnostic units and machines and all sorts of other things. So you're doing really well in, quite frankly, the richer institutions that can afford it. What is the plans for a scaled down version of these so you still have a footprint in maybe some of the underserved, underprivileged areas where people eventually want you to do clinical trial matching, or finding these sort of nuggets or these like diamonds in the rough that are going to be in institutions where you're not located? What is sort of the plan to be more visible there?
Yeah, I think in many, I mean, we think about that a lot about our market segmentation and where we're going. And I think what I'm seeing is that as we've moved to the Edison platform, that's being kind of packaged into almost everything that we do in some way, shape, or form. Whether that is our lowest cost packs or our most expensive packs, it's part of it. That allows us to get access to those lower ends that we haven't had before. We don't charge for the platform. It's integrated in. So honestly, that's probably going to be our best way to get it in market and to be able to serve some of these underserved areas is kind of our lower cost systems also having the integration just like our higher end systems do.
Absolutely. So what's next, Bree? What are you most excited about, and what's up and coming for your department?
I think our next big area is really, we're going to be focused on this deployment of clinical decision support. I don't think we've said we've solved that completely yet. That will be our major focus, for the next year. It's been interesting because as I've moved from my providers being my customer to pharma being customers, I thought it was, fairly slow on the provider side, but pharma moves actually much slower and they're used to it because of the drug development cycle. And so it's been a new, the timelines are a lot longer than what I'm used to, but it's going to be our major focus is proving that we can do this and do this well. And expanding those partnerships. We don't expect to have hundreds of partnerships with pharma. We probably are going to do 25, that we have really deep partnerships, and then finding those synergies where we can go do more together to advance both of our visions around precision health, whether that is in AI development or more data aggregation with, again, the genomic data and some of the other data areas we have. So right now it's do one thing well and ensure we do it really well. And then we'll go from there.
Love it. This is absolutely fantastic. Well, we're just going to be closing up here, but for anybody who is listening to the show or watching it, and you're interested in speaking with Bree, finding out more about what you can do to partner, collaborate, learn more about what they're doing around data aggregation, interoperability, precision health, what you can actually do if you're working in the rare diseases area to be able to collaborate, we will be leaving her contact details in the show notes below. So please be on the lookout for that. If you also enjoy this, we also encourage you to check out impetusdigital.com. These are the kinds of conversations that we have in our Insight platform with pharmaceutical companies, payers, allied healthcare providers, physicians, and patients. If we're working together to try to determine the new algorithms you're going to do, or the new plans that you're going to be putting into place for your rare diseases programs, strategies, and tactics, we will work with you asynchronously and synchronously through a series of touch points so that you can move your agenda forward. Please like and subscribe to our channel, and we would love it and appreciate if you could leave some feedback on iTunes. Thanks everybody for your time this afternoon. We really appreciate it. And thank you, Bree, for an excellent and very thought-provoking conversation.